Hello, learning nerds, and welcome on in to the nerdiest podcast you're going to hear today. Dr. Luke here, and today we are talking all about accessibility. At the timing of this podcast recording, it just so happens to be Global Accessibility Awareness Day, and certainly when it comes to learning experiences, accessibility is an essential detail that we should absolutely be paying attention to. And it just so happens that I have a friend who specializes in thinking about accessibility and online learning experiences, and that is who you're going to be hearing from today. We are going to be joined by Dr. Nicole L'Etoile. She has been working inside of this space for quite some time, and I really wanted her to be able to come on this show and to share more about how to make our online learning experiences accessible for all people. Nicole is actually a recent graduate over at Instructional Design Institute, and a part of the Instructional Design Institute's program is that the students have to be able to create their own type of course at the end of everything, and she chose to be able to make a course about how to make content accessible, especially within the online space. And as I was going through this course, I was looking at it and I was like, this is amazing. I want you to come on the podcast and talk more about this, because certainly she has many different types of tips and strategies that you're going to be hearing about inside of this episode. So we're going to be hearing more from tools, from resources, even going back to the basics of defining accessibility and what do we really mean? How can we go above and beyond to make our accessible types of learning experiences really for all people? And also to talking about the challenges with accessibility. We bring this up, and certainly I have worked with some subject matter experts before in the past, and they kind of push back against me with accessibility. And I was like, that's kind of weird. So we talk about this to be able to figure out different types of ways and strategies to get around these types of barriers if you just so happen to be facing them inside of the workplace. So today is all about designing learning experiences for all people. And of course, be sure to go down below inside of a show notes, folks, because this is a show notes episode for sure. Lots of resources, lots of tools. Nicole also has made her course that she created into a public version of this course for online learning experiences and making them accessible for all people. So that course is actually going to be launching soon as well. So be sure to go down below inside of the show notes and check out everything. But with all of that being said, I'm not going to waste any more time. Here is the one and the only Dr. Nicole L'Etoile. Nicole, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Luke. Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Of course, happy to have you. Nicole, for the folks at home who don't know who you are, could you just please introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit more about who you are and what is it that you do?
Absolutely. My name is Nicole L'Etoile. I am a white female, late 40s. I have brown hair with some blondish highlights. It's pulled back right now in a ponytail. And I'm in my home office with my headset and my new podcast microphone. And I'm ready to talk.
Of course, of course. Now, Nicole, you are here on a very special day, which is somehow happens to magically align from when we scheduled this podcast, which it happens to be Global Accessibility Awareness Day. And wouldn't you know it, we are talking about how to make online content accessible for all people. So once again, I didn't plan that.
That was amazing. And when this was planned, I thought, wow. He is just, and he was so cool about, you were just so cool about it because you're like, let's do it Thursday. And I was like, he must know. He must know it is. So yeah, it just really worked out.
But he doesn't, and he just got very lucky.
It worked out.
It just so happened that the stars align with this podcast episode. But from knowing you, Nicole, because now I have known you for over the last year, you're a recent graduate over at Instructional Design Institute. You also created a fantastic course project that really was all about today's theme with talking about accessibility and being able to educate all folks as far as this goes. So clearly, you're very passionate about this area. And I'm kind of curious about, where does your passion come from? How were you introduced to accessibility, especially inside of the online learning space?
Yeah, well, thanks for the question. And I'm just going to back up and give a little bit too context about my role and my background, and then lead into that question. So I'm in my 23rd year career, all within the K through 12 space. If you were to ask me what my title was, I would say professional development specialist, learning development specialist. I don't know these days. I think there's so many things that I could call myself. Founder of my L'Etoile Education LLC, an LMS specialist, but really, I started out, I'm a technology and business educator who went up the ranks and became a school principal and a consultant and did some PD. And I I think what happened was I kept thinking, what is next for me? Where am I going? And I ended up deciding to really focus back on how do I put all this together. I'm a teacher, I'm a school leader, but I love technology. I love creating courses. And so I took a role as an LMS administrator, instructional designer. And I think when you ask the question of when did this become a passion, it became a passion when it became my everyday work. And I took on this role. And one of the key responsibilities of the job was that I had to do what we call an admin review for a course. So every course designer, every instructional designer on the team would create the course, and I would either provide support along the way, or I would receive the course at the end, and I'd have to put it through a rigorous admin course review and say whether it could go live or not. And it would end up being a back and forth between me and the designer or the subject matter expert and their designer, because sometimes there were three of us working on that course. And what was happening was, as I was getting more confident and comfortable and learning about accessibility, because that was a key part of that review, was I started to realize that we were not meeting standards, that we were not doing a great job. So I really immersed myself in it. And to me, in my personality, it's if you know, do better, right? So once we know, now we need to do better. And I also saw that as coming from education, we provide education and professional development to other educators so that they could support their students. And we should be the gold star. We should be the model. Because if we're not doing that, how can we ask others to do it?
Exactly. And I'm sure you made so many friends by calling them out, saying that things are not accessible, and they just loved your comments.
Oh, yes. I was going to say, a couple of times was referred to as the accessibility police. We had a copyright police, and we also had accessibility police. So sorry about that. Oh, yeah, loved it.
You're like, you're sorry, but you're not. You're like, kind of should be definitely doing this, that, and yeah. But so, because I've been there before too, so I'm like, oh, I know that. I know that all too well. So it's always a good time to try to be able to do those things. But as you were saying, extremely important, essential, crucial. We should be obviously doing all these things. So before, and I kept on saying all of these things, but I want to break that down for a second, because when we're thinking about from accessibility, I know that as soon as we say that word, folks are immediately thinking about a couple of different things as far as for what exactly are we talking about when we're saying we're trying to be able to make a online learning experience accessible. So I'd love to dive into that and to get more like of a clearer definition and perception about when you hear the word accessibility, what comes to mind as far as for what's inside of that space?
Yeah. So when talking about accessibility in the context of online learning, referring say to design or delivery of educational experiences in a way to ensure that all learners, regardless of their physical impairments or cognitive, if we break down the different disabilities, but impairments and disabilities, that they can fully participate and engage with the content. And then it goes broader than that. Can everyone access the content beyond visual impairments or cognitive impairments and disabilities? And so we're talking about content accessibility, ensuring the materials are accessible. We're talking about the platform. Is the LMS, can we navigate it? Is the learning management system itself, is it accessible? Are we making sure that communication within our courses is clear? Do we have assessments and activities that are adopting UDL principles? And so I think it means a lot of things. I think we start with the checklist. We start with the WCAG standards and saying, are we meeting the standards? Are we within compliance? And then, I don't know about you, but I don't like when anyone gets left out. I especially feel that when we're designing experiences, it's our job, it's our responsibility to make sure that we include all people, all learners. And so regardless of an impairment or disability, is this content accessible to everyone that wants to participate?
Yeah, of course. And yes, we shouldn't be leaving people out, especially in education.
Right.
Of all the places, let's not have this be an education for thinking about leaving people out for everything. So that is a excellent definition and very textbook, very impressive. You're able to say that. So when thinking about with this, I would love to actually start with a success story, because I know that we were talking about from accessibility as far as for like being the accessibility police, and some people I know can have like oh, there's that person who's always going to flag me down. But however, there's like for superpowers as far as for having your learning experiences accessible for all, because now they serve all people. So to me, that's like a massive win to be able to go into that direction. So I'd love to hear an example about a time where you saw an opportunity to be able to take something to make it more accessible, and in turn that actually made the project like 10 times better. Do you have any story you could share?
I do, of course. Yeah. And there were a few that came to mind as you're asking the question. And there's real concrete examples, and then there's some more of the emotion, the personal side to it. I think if we're looking at a concrete example, you know how to see those accessibility overlays nowadays that are on sites, and you see the little accessibility icon, and they're everywhere. And an organization that I was at was using it on our Moodle LMS, and quickly come to realize that that's not the way to go, because for those who are using screen readers and assistive technologies and have certain disabilities and impairments, that overlay actually makes it worse. So the overlays themselves can prevent screen readers from reading certain things. It can mask. It becomes about, a CYA as opposed to, is it really making it accessible? And so a project that I was on and what we led decided to do what we call an accessibility review. So it was putting together a team of 5 people who take our courses and ask them to review a course from accessibility lens. We had somebody on there with a visual impairment, a hearing impairment, motor, so only could use the keyboard, and so had different lenses to go through courses and then provide some feedback. And that was truly one of those experiences where, again, it's just great to go through it and provide this opportunity, but to hear from the participants who said, thank you. Thank you, one, for thinking of us. Thank you for making the effort. And it'll never be perfect, and we know that, but we just want to appreciate and we feel seen, and thank you. So I would say that went a long way, and a project that I'm proud of.
Absolutely. Why would you not want to be able to get feedback directly from the users who are going to be experiencing this, and to give you that? And I know, but that's some standard practices for corporate organizations, where I was just like, that is so brilliant to be able to do, especially like for products of apps and everything of the sort. But that's just a part of our standards, to be able to say that if every person's going to be downloading this app, then we need to go right to the source, have them actually test it, and to give us feedback to say, are we on track, or maybe not so much, and we got to figure things out. So that is a brilliant idea to be able to do.
Yeah. I think it just seems so natural, right? So you want to get feedback on any learning experience, mostly that you're providing. And so I think what was happening is an admin review of the course. Well, I don't necessarily use a screen reader. I can test it with a screen reader, and I use certain ones to do that with, but I'm not really getting the learner experience fully. So in order to do that, I need to hear from someone who is going to experience this in that way.
And so your post, your message reminds me too about one post that I saw, because you and I are both very active on LinkedIn. We're using this thing on a daily basis. One of the things that I didn't think about when you post inside of LinkedIn is the way that you have the spacing in between the different types of sentences. So the ones that usually go viral, which is like line, and then like you hit enter, and there's another line, and like it has it just goes forever and ever and ever. And I was following, and a friend of the show, Bella Gaetan, made a post about how she has mobility issues. And she was like, when you do that, I am scrolling for an eternity to be able to read this post. It's not optimal to be able to do it in this way for folks like myself. And I was like, I had no idea. And immediately, as soon as she said that, I was just like, I will not do that. I will make sure it's spaced accordingly, so that way people can follow along and it's not like a tremendous eyesore.
Yeah, yeah. And it goes same thing with again a course or within documents. So a lot of times you'll see documents embedded into courses and they're not necessarily using the heading structure. And it's the same, it's almost asking someone to open up the document and be like, it doesn't matter to me what you want to read in this document or not. You're just going to have to scroll through this entire thing and I'm not going to provide you any context labels or headings to stop you and say, this is important. You might want to read this part. So it's the similar experience. You don't know until you're in that position of like, oh, this is really difficult for me. And I always say accessibility is it's when there is no barrier to the learning, but also when someone doesn't have to ask or bring it to your attention. That to me is a true perfect gold star of accessibility, that someone can access and be part of a learning experience without having to even think about their disability.
Now that's an absolute win. So let's talk about a few types of typical challenges in regards to, you were mentioning about how you reviewed courses and you would try to be able to see about what people did and trying to be able to flag them and things of this nature. For the folks listening at home who are the educators, the designers, what are some of the common types of challenges in regards to what you would see, especially within the online learning space and thinking about it from an accessibility lens?
Yeah, I think the first thing that comes to mind is cognitive overload. So if we're talking about, neurodivergent, and we're thinking about people that just thinking about the content coming into you all overwhelmingly. I reviewed one course once and it was, all the bells and whistles. And this particular designer just loved to try every H5P that they could. And it was like a goal of theirs. Every week I'm going to insert this new interactive tool because it's fun for me to play and learn and put it in. And I think experiencing that cognitive overload of wanting to do too much, when sometimes it could be a simple text document that could get, a simple text document or activity assignment that you can accomplish a deeper learning experience. So I would say cognitive overload when it comes to courses is something that I've experienced often. Color contrast, believe it or not, is still, although basic, color contrast is often. I love my WebAIM color contrast checker tool to check those things. But yeah, if you you'll see that. And, we know the basics. There's no alternative text and still see that often. Closed captions and a transcript. Audio transcripts is the requirement. Sometimes you only see one or the other or none. So yeah, I think still those basic ones are what I see the most. And cognitive overload is the one that comes to mind right now.
Yeah. When you mentioned about that too, I'm not sure if you saw, there was a series about the New York Jets on YouTube, and they were showing about the coaches going up to the front of the room and giving their PowerPoint presentations, like breaking down the different types of plays. Well, the Jets have an instructional designer on the staff, and he took a picture of that and he was just like, I promise I did not do this. It's like,
that's great.
Yeah, and especially too when thinking about with the different color combinations for those who are colorblind and have those impairments, and it's just like, why are you making things like red and green? Like what? Why?
Yeah. I get you want to make this highlight and make it bright and yellow, but it's not really the best way to get the message across. I think sometimes you still see folks relying too much on color for conveying important information. If I put something in red but I don't put important or notice here or attention, use some language and text, they don't know that it's important just by color alone.
Right.
Yeah.
No, it makes sense. So you mentioned actually like a couple of tools in that last answer, and that's actually where I wanted to go next, is to hear more, since you are so fantastic inside of this space. What are some tools you can share with us in regards to things that we should just always have them in the background or always at hand to be able to make sure that we're running them for our learning experiences?
Yeah, I like that. I try to put my two hats on, of being that LMS administrator hat and then the instructional designer hat, and knowing that there's slightly sometimes different roles, but the more that was an NBC thing. The more you know, and the more you know, rainbow.
Flash.
Yes. I did say that I was in my late 40s, didn't I? Yeah. So that's dating myself. So yeah, I think. Whatever, I start with the low, kind of low effort, high impact, and your accessibility checkers built in to your tools are a great place to start. Most have them. if you're using an LMS, you'll have them in all of the ones I've seen so far, Canvas, Brightspace, Moodle. The ones inside Canva have them too. If you're using Canva or Venage is the other one that people use for diagrams and images. So anyway, so using your built-in tools. I use the Wave tool. That's popular. It's free. You can get that on the webaim.org website. And the Wave tool, I keep that up and I run them. And after I design a course, like currently right now I'm designing something and I built it out and I put out all the modules and then I ran my Wave tool after. Just I try not to look too much at everything. Start with the contrast, the critical items, and then I go from more critical to significant and look at the alerts. So Wave tools one. The ARC toolkit is free. The ARC toolkit is something that you can go if you're a little bit more savvy and familiar with code and you're not uncomfortable getting into the developer tools. So it runs on your browser and then you go into your more tools, developer tools, and you can go from there and it'll pull up and it does a little bit more checker of structure and headings. It's one that I use often. Of course, if you're using Grackle for docs and slides, if you bet a lot of presentation content, I always refer to Grackle, free extension. So those would be the ones that I would suggest for everyday use. And then even before I go live, I run my own, I have a Mac, so I run the voiceover to make sure that, or free screen reader, NVDA. I check that as well. I think sometimes that's goes a little bit above and beyond. But if you're willing, and I always say it's always worth going within designing from the start, where you keep it in mind from the very beginning. If you're going to write out the text, put it in Microsoft Word, use the heading system, use Grackle, check it first, then put it into the platform. And but if you don't have the time for that and you're building out and you're okay with doing these checks before it goes live, then those are the tools I'd recommend to just give it a look over. Like I said, it'll never be perfect. It's just have to, the more you know.
I mean, you absolutely just shared some tools I have not heard of before. So, like, it's obviously we're going to keep on learning more as we keep on, which is the whole point of this conversation and the podcast. Keep on sharing more insights and knowledge and being able to figure out about what folks who are actually really inside of this space are, what are they currently doing, what are they using, and everything of a sort. When you rattled off a ton of these different types of awesome different forms of products. If you are currently working with a SME, I'm trying to envision myself as an ID and I'm going through a type of a course and I'm working with a SME or a professor, whoever it is, and then being able to say, okay, I just did all of my checks. I'm going through things. There's actually a few different types of areas of opportunities here that I want to be able to work on, to reshift, to focus and whatnot. And I know from past experience as well that if I try to make a whole bunch of recommendations, I might get pushback. It's going to take too long, Luke. It's going to cost too much time. It's going to do blah, blah, blah. And of course, I'm like, that doesn't matter. It needs to be done this way. How have you handled pushback as far as for those types of common things, whether it's going to be from cost or from timing or from deadlines, deliverables, whatever it is? How do you handle pushback while trying to make sure that you are going in the right direction from that design type of angle and perspective?
Yeah, that's a really great question and something that I lived through quite some time. And, when I was working on a team and it was my full-time job, it was actually more challenging than it is now as a consultant where I go in and do audits because people have asked me to come in and they want me to tell them and they want to make those changes. So it feels a little bit different in how it's kind of my approach to it, whether you want the low effort, high impact, or if we're going all in, or, where can we start? And I always say an extra bit of effort contributes to a long way. And so if it just means that I have to find a few of these to share and get started and win over the trust of, look, we're doing this for everyone. I think there's definitely some empathy that needs to be a conversation around that. Like I started out saying earlier, that we don't want to leave people out. And how do you feel if you can't experience that learning or you couldn't access that learning? So sometimes there is some of those deep conversations around empathy and trying to put the mirror on the other person and say, try to think about how that might feel. So extra bit of effort. I mean, I can tell you about a project that, again, in kind of this reactive stage of coming on in the role, and there was almost 45 courses that were built. And you've got designers who've been building them for years and then come to find out that, to their knowledge, they had some basic understanding, or what they thought was they thought they had a solid foundation, right? So the basics we talk about, alt text, closed captions. And then realizing that, ooh, that's just scratching the surface. And so, do I now go back and fix all these? There's a little bit of panic, a little bit of time and effort and money. But you make a commitment as a team that this is the right thing to do. Make that commitment, and then a plan. And I always support the plan. So if I'm going to introduce something new to you, or say, hey, I think that this could be fixed and this is why, and I'm going to support it. I'm going to do it maybe for you to start. I'm going to gradually release it, show you how. Maybe we build it in where this doesn't show up at the admin review. It's part of the course design course that we give people before they can design a course, things like that. And so, I think it just takes a lot of intention and effort up front, but it's going to save us time and money in the end and in the long run if we are thinking about these things before we begin and while we're doing it.
I love that you're also leading by example too. You said that you're going to be showing them first, which there's a lot of the times that I've found that people just simply don't know. They think they're doing things right. And then you show additional ways, and as you said, you're like, I didn't know we could do that. And it's like, yeah, we can. And of course, like I said too, there's always more and more that keeps on coming about for things that I didn't realize was a possibility. And now all of a sudden we have this new way of doing something. And it's just like, oh, here we go. Here's our new standard for going forwards for things. And the one example that I think about too, and for some people who have like written into the show before to say that like this is a real life example of people saying that like my school is a problem, they're not paying attention to this, and as an instructional designer they're like, I know we need to be, so how do I get them to think about those things? And you can of course relate it back to like, well, if you're teaching in person and you have a person who is literally in need and cannot participate because you are literally excluding them, like you wouldn't do that because it's in person, because you can see them right in front of you and being like, that's, you wouldn't do that. And now we're in the online space and you can't see the folks. So therefore it doesn't have like that much of that form of a urgency because you're behind a virtual screen now. And it's like, no, it's still just as important. It's just we're delivering it in a different way now.
Yeah.
So you're like trying to play like that.
Yeah, I mean, I've had conversations with certain designers or subject matter experts, and there's this feeling of like, well, it's a facilitated course, and I'll know if they have a disability. They'll tell me, and I will, or they'll have a certain need. That maybe not a disability, but a preference, a learning. They'll tell me, and I'll just, and it's like, no, that's not how it works. Like So yeah, I think just having these conversations is the first step, to really take an inward look too. How are we doing things? I spent, this is something I spent 2 hours yesterday. I'm working on a module, and I realized I made a lot of videos. And after, you plan it out, and I was like, oh, this is going to be like an hour worth of you putting out the audio transcripts, making sure that the link is proper, making sure that when you click that link, that it doesn't open to a new window, because that's also something that, we don't realize that for accessibility purposes, it's great for every learner, but not necessarily for screen reader users. So you got to balance that out a bit. But I spent hours putting out the transcript, and I was like thinking, okay, next module, maybe there's a better way. I don't need to do as much video, or if it is video, then you have to spend the time to do the transcript. So yeah, walk the walk and model what we want people to do.
Yeah, exactly. And there's some that I'm finding too from a transcript perspective that have just come so far. Because I use Adobe Premiere for editing my videos, and there is, of course, a transcript and closed caption feature and everything, and it's pretty darn good.
Yeah.
I mean, I think about before where it was awful, and I was like, that's it. But now it's so much better. And yes, there are some words, especially in instructional design land, that we say for acronyms and such, where it's just like, it will never pick up SME. Impossible. It will never pick that up.
Yeah.
But for the most part, it's pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a good place to start. And editing, I rely a lot on my closed captions and go into YouTube maybe, but then I go beyond the auto sync now. I'll go in and edit and make sure that things are correct, that I do my best. And I have to say, like, you'll miss some, but start looking at it, making sure time to time that you're getting these accurate. The newest tool, Synthesia, I know we've talked a little bit on that about people. It's hit LinkedIn and chatting about it a bit. Synthesia, like, well, I'll download the subtitles and they're great. They're wonderful. So I don't need to auto sync. I'll upload them right to YouTube and everything. It looks great. So, yeah, the tools are come a long way. And so
They have.
Yeah.
They have. So if I am going to be, let's say I'm creating a course today, and I want to make sure that I'm being as thorough as possible. You've talked about a couple of different strategies and tools and whatnot, but if I'm trying to be able to go through with everything, what would you recommend just for like the introductory steps, just to make sure that I'm doing everything properly as far as for designing an online learning experience? What should I make sure I am definitely following to make sure I'm going down the right path?
Yeah. So, you know, a checklist is a great place to start. I mean, there's so many out there. You can find them all. I have one on my website, free download. There's WebAIM has a great one. They're just Google or ask ChatGPT. She'll make you one too, or he. I say she because mine has a woman's voice on the chat. 4.0. I gave her a female voice.
Oh, interesting. I haven't
Yeah,
used it my
I actually. So
haven't used that feature yet.
I'm gonna go on a sidebar for a second because I used it and I asked her. I go, "Do you have a name?" And she says, "No. Do you want me to have a name?" And I said, "Okay, let's give you a name." And then I asked her. I said, "Well, do you have what do you look like?" She goes, "What do you want me to look like? Can you describe what you'd like me to look like?" So yeah. So that's my. I don't even know what. See, I told you I was going to go on a tangent. Where did I go off? Where
Well,
am
the
I
future
now?
is fun, but you're right though.
Yeah.
You were saying that you can ask, which I've done before. I've asked ChatGPT to give me the 10 steps to make sure that my courses are accessible.
Yeah. Yeah. So a checklist. Exactly. So start there. Because what happens is sometimes there's an item on the checklist that goes, huh, I didn't. And then you go further, right? You look into it a little bit further. So whether, not most people talk about heading structures. Well, there's also certain structures to tables. If you put a table in your course or on a document, there's this very specific structure to how I label those headings and the columns and the rows. And so I might just see on the checklist, make sure your tables are formatted correctly. Well, what does that mean? And so I'll go to WebAIM and I'll dig a little deeper, or I'll go to another source and dig a little deeper. So yeah, I'd start there. I would say from there, try one of the tools, the free tool, Wave, Grackle, and just run it and see what it shows you. And yeah, and send me a message on LinkedIn. I'll do a demo for you.
Other than that's
Yeah.
literally the best. All right. Well, you talked about generative AI, and of course, I can't just overlook that.
Okay.
This is my life is now AI at this moment in time. I'm developing like 3 new courses on AI. So I'm just like, life is AI for me at the moment. I have to know, what have you been experimenting with in regards to generative AI and the accessibility space? What have you tried, seen, done? Would just love to hear what you've been up to.
Okay. Yeah. So first there's, as we know, so many new things that are happening that I can't keep track and I can't keep up. I mean, Google just released something yesterday. I had to write it down because I was like, what is it called? Astra, Astra. Am I saying it right? Where
I don't even know what that is. Oh,
so
sure.
So this tool is for your eye. It'll be your eyes and your. It's going to. So I don't even know what eye tracker.
Oh,
yeah.
yes,
So that's one.
Yeah.
But is that Astra? Now we're going to have to like start looking things up because there were 3 that were introduced yesterday that I've pinned that I need to learn more about that I wrote down. But then, yeah, the eye tracker that I saw demoed and I was like, okay, so that is amazing. But I say, so ChatGPT for all of them now, it's free. There is an accessibility. I don't even know what do you call these when you can make your own chat on this, you choose your Explorer ChatGPT. So
it's a custom GPT feature.
It's a custom GPT feature. And so I have one called Accessibility Ally, ALLY. And so that one has been great. And I'll put code in there and I'll say, can you clean my code up? Like, so one of the things that I look for is, I don't want to have any extra tags that don't need to be there. I don't want to create any extra, pick up a blank heading, pick up a blank paragraph tag. So I will run something through there and clean up my code. and then bring it back over. So that's really amazing. I didn't have that access before in the AI tool. Of course, yeah, I could go on. I have to like think about all the ones that I've been
there's
using.
so many, and
So many.
that's why I'm asking. And also, as I'm looking at this more of a left-hand side, now I'm not sure if Astra is the eye tracker. I think that's the new like Google Lens, if you will,
Oh,
of
okay.
like doing the video and being like, "What is this on my desk?" And it's just like, "Those are markers, whatever." I think
Yeah.
it's that one. So no one quote us. We're learning real time timestamp here.
It came out less than 24 hours ago,
Yeah.
and I was like, I think I need to pay attention to this. What is this?
Yeah, that's definitely an interesting part. But there's so like you, I also did the Your UDL Pal one as far as from like an accessibility perspective to be able to help me from that goes. And there's also some things too where I was just like something you would just assume you could do, but then you try it out and you're like, oh wow, that actually worked. So for instance, if I have a bunch of photos and I want to be able to get for the alt text
Yeah.
or for tags or for whatever it is, image description, and I can slowly take it and be able to say like, hey, generate image description for me for what this is. And it does it beautifully. And I was like, oh yeah. Same
Yeah.
thing with like a massive chart as far as for like, there's a lot of information here. I'm like, how can I actually summarize this? And it can just like, send it on over. It's just,
Absolutely.
yeah, you're like, oh yeah, that would obviously I should have done that before, and I
Yeah, you know,
never
and if you go beyond the alt text, right? So sometimes those documents, or when we want to avoid any image with text on it, if it's especially if we can't do alt text, or if we're gonna do a better job describing that image, it could give you. ChatGPT can give you a really nice description that you can embed right into the page itself so if I have a chart or a data table or something I'm trying to describe that I can't fit in 125 characters, I'm going to be able to use that to generate a little bit more descriptive text around it for the content of the page. And so I actually turn to that a little bit more than I do alt text now, is I try to use generative AI to give me and say, okay, this is what I'm describing. This is what I want to put out there. And then that just help. And so I would mention also, if you're creating scripts, that it could be helpful to create the script and then also look at like, so do I need audio description? So sometimes you'll have a video. I see this a lot, and I'm never going to call anybody out on LinkedIn or call anybody out anywhere. But if you put out unless you're on my team and you're putting a live course, I may call you out. So there's if your video has no audio, nobody talking, maybe there's music playing, but I always think of the Star Wars intro. I wish I could play it for you, right? So the Star Wars intro, and you hear dun dun dun, dun, and the thing starts scrolling. If you look at it on YouTube, there's no closed captions because nobody talks, right? But there's no audio description to tell the person that there is a black sky with stars, right? So we call those audio descriptions. And you check them on your Netflix. We have them available. Sometimes on Netflix, sometimes you're like, oh, how did the narrator get on? Turn that off. And so the setting for the narration comes on. And so I notice sometimes in videos that if we post things that don't have voices, that you want to provide some type of audio or description to what is being said or the images on the screen.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And
Yeah.
that's an excellent example, by the way, because there is a lot of text for that Star Wars introduction. This goes on for forever. So that's a great point. It also reminds me too that I read something a while back, which now I do for all of my YouTube shorts, is that because of the way that people are now absorbing content in different types of ways, Gen Z and some millennials as well, and I am a later millennial, but still a millennial, is that we do not use YouTube Shorts, Instagram Reels, anything like that with sound. We watch things in silence. And I don't know I don't know why. I know for me, it's kind of more like a polite thing. If I'm on the train and I'm bored and I'm just like scrolling, I'm not going to have this thing blaring with sound, obviously. So in order for me to actually enjoy the content, you need to have the captions that are in the middle of the phone, or else I'm just going to literally go to the next thing and to find one that actually does have the words that are being said right there. And I saw something along the lines about how I'm not alone in this, that right now, the way that people are consuming content on their phones, that is now like a requirement, or else people will just not watch, period. So it's now shifted to, of course, the whole point about things from accessibility as well, too, is that it's not just going to be enjoyed by like one individual. If you do something for one person, it can literally benefit all people.
Yes.
Which is the whole point. You know, I'm talking about UDL and everything else. That like, no, everyone can enjoy this. And you wouldn't think that years ago, as far as for saying that like closed captioning is required on YouTube, but it's like, no, like you have to have that, or else it's just going to miss everything.
Yeah.
Which is so interesting to see how like that's how technology has shifted into what we do now.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if we're talking about creating courses where you are giving multiple ways of people to, right? So whether you can read it, you can listen to it. I think whether we have a visual impairment, a physical disability, hearing impairment, it doesn't necessarily have to be. It just might be that this is how we take in content or have preferences, or that we learn now, and providing different ways. So, okay, this is another example. This is where I told you I'm going to go on tangents and just start talking about one thing and go random. But like, so if I have someone who's taking a course with me and she has a newborn, and she's like, I don't know if I can sit and be part of all of the content. And it's like, well, I'm going to make sure that I'm going to create some more audio content for you, and not just for you, right? But for those who might need audio content, because that's what fits their lifestyle, and that's what's going to fit and give them access. That has nothing to do necessarily, it's not an impairment or a disability, it's just life, right? So I think thinking about it that way too is important when we think about accessibility. And I always make sure that when I do my stories, because everybody loves my Instagram stories. If you don't follow me on Instagram, it's all about running, by the way, is that I always make sure there's captions in there, that my stories that I'm talking, that just in case. Yeah.
I mean, I also think too about how for folks who listen to this show and English is not their first language, but transcript is easier for them to be able to not just read, but then to also like make sure that what we are saying like aligns with everything. So I've heard from plenty of folks who listen to the show where they're like, yeah, if you don't have a transcript, like it's not going to hit home for me. I'm like, yep, noted.
It's good feedback. It's great feedback.
Oh, always. Yeah. The amount of things that I have learned as far as from an accessibility perspective by just posting stuff on the internet has taught me so much. And sometimes I'm horrifically embarrassed where I'm like, I never thought of that. I was like, thank you for sharing. But the point is that like you share with me, so now I know not to do that, or now I know to do something else in the future to be able to say that, right, I need to think about X, especially so Zoom. Doing webinars and things of that nature, not everyone can participate if you put them inside of breakout rooms. So we started to be able to say when we're hosting large webinars that if you feel more comfortable and if it is better for you to be inside of our main room and we do not put you into a breakout room, that is perfectly fine. Don't go to the breakout room. Communicate with us inside of a chat, and we'll go that way because not everyone can communicate verbally. So that was something I learned about from a webinar, and someone gave me feedback. They wrote in afterwards to be able to say like, hey, Luke, just FYI, like I would really prefer to be in the breakout room. I can only chat with literally the chat text field, and that is going to help me. I'm like, noted. Yeah. I will say that from now on. And I do. I've been 4 years, and I still. Yeah,
people don't know what they don't know. I mean, they don't know what they don't know. And I think that if sharing that along the way and giving those tips is how we learn. That's how we know. And I always, like, you'll never hear me say I'm an accessibility expert. I'll never put it on my page. I'll never say it because I don't know how you could, be an expert in that without, because it's definitely something that can be changing and growing and learning. I don't know, maybe that's just my hang up on being called an expert in anything, is that you just, you don't know what you don't know. And, as we have these conversations on Global Accessibility Awareness Day of all days, we can dig in and find more to unpeel, and that just so much more to unpeel. Always.
Yeah. I've never called myself an instructional design expert. To your expert point, the expert word is weird to me. Where I'm like, know a thing or two, but like expert, whatever. Anyway, I don't know. Nicole, what is the future of accessibility like? Where are we going? What's going to be the next thing?
Oh, I don't know. I wish I could look at my crystal ball.
Where's your crystal ball?
Where's my crystal ball? So, when just having the release of what Google shared yesterday, with the tool of what is it called? Oh my gosh, I don't know what these things are called anymore. I keep thinking about the courses that we're creating right now on the learning management systems, and that they're still somewhat static in a way, right? So we do our best. We take you on these journeys. We create stories and give you scenarios and videos and create ways that people can reflect and provide peer reviews. And we do our best to make it as accessible as possible. And then I think about the new technology and I go, ooh, where is that in these courses? And when they get to these courses, I don't know what that looks like. And I don't know if then what are the new rules? What are the new standards for those who need them because of because of a disability or impairment, or just because that is best practice? And I don't know. And I would love to get my hands on some of these new tools so that I can play, but also who has access to them? So if I put them in a course, am I creating another barrier? I don't know.
Yeah, I can tell you what I hope for from an LMS perspective, because I'm going to use hope, because as you just said, you've mentioned a few different types of tools. I literally don't know what they are. So I'm going to have to, like, from the Astra and if I'm saying that right, because just hearing about them from today. But what I would love to be able to hope for is that inside of a learning management system, as you're building everything, you know how you always have to either save and publish before you get a module that goes student facing live or whatever like that. I would love for something to be able to actually do that. If you do save and if you do publish, then it runs that check with AI embedded inside the LMS to be here's what we found, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and be perfect, fix it, give me updates, how do I deal with this, to be able to make sure that you're properly following this, and not just from it calling you out on what has or has not something, but also to then to be able to give you a guide about how to actually do it. So not just enough to say this is missing, it's just what else?
Most of the tools that I mentioned do give the remediation, right? So they give the solution, they give the fix. And so I think it becomes a combination of manual and automatic. So it will automatically find the error. It'll make some suggestion. There are third parties that you can pay that will fix these for you. There are ones, Moodle uses, I think Moodle, and they might have been with someone else now, but Brickfields is one that I'm familiar with, or Ally is another. And these are the built-in ones that they will fix them. There are remediations that will do that for you. I tend to be more manual and old school, I suppose, than that. But they also do recommend that you do a little bit of both. So some of these exist. You've got me a little bit more curious to see which other ones are out there that a designer could use on their own without having to even go through the LMS, or because those can get costly when you embed them into the platform. And I'm not, as an instructional designer, going to go pay for that to run it by myself. But I imagine, that's where we're headed. That's interesting. Yeah.
Because right now, every learning management system that I've been following too, of course, everyone's talking about generative AI. I shouldn't say LMSs. Everyone's talking about AI, right? And it's just well, if we're talking about AI and all the awesome, great things it can do, to me, the superpower of AI is accessibility, where I'm here's all this awesome new stuff that we can do that it makes it easier to be able to do this, to design for all people. So if you embed it into the learning management system and then make it even easier for people to actually find and to make the changes and manual override, as you were saying, because I know sometimes you get something that's an image description and you're oh no, that's way off. No,
thank you.
That's not right. So definitely have that ability to be able to do so. But that would be incredible, because there's so many people who are a team of one, and they're doing the best they can. But you talked about timing before, but sometimes this can just take a long time to thoroughly, properly go through every tiny little thing. And if it was already there, then just, I don't know. I hope that's where we go.
That would be fantastic. Can we make one? Do we have the skills? Where's the team? Can we find the team to create one?
Go find the team. I mean, we have enough smart people in our network. I think we could figure out how to be able to actually make this a wide known thing. So
sure.
Whatever. We'll put a pin in that and to go back to there. Nicole, this has been awesome.
Thanks.
It's been a great conversation. I have learned a ton. I'm sure the audience has also learned plenty of things as well too. Where can they go to learn more about you, what you're up to? You also have a fantastic new course about accessibility as well. Like, share with us everything.
Yeah, so I'm on LinkedIn, and it's Nicole Nicole, and my last name is L'Etoile Letoile. If you notice, L'Etoile in French means star, so that's why I am L'Etoile Education, Star Education. You can also go to my LLC business page if you'd like and check out more. But you can find the course as soon as you go to my LinkedIn page. Click on my website and go to my courses. I would say that's probably the fastest way to do that, and then that'll take you to the course. And the course is hosted right now on Maven, and we've talked a little bit about this, but I'm hosting it on Maven, but it is a Canvas course. And so it'll be all things accessibility, what we talked about today around the standards, but also more around designing for best practices. So definitely going to have to talk about UDL for sure, but we're going to focus in on, as you're designing your course from the beginning, from the start, how to intentionally think about accessibility so that when your course goes live, we've done a good job. So I hope you join me. We start September 23rd. Of course, as a former educator and school principal, I was thinking I'm going to give everybody the summer off. Let's not even try to start it soon. Also, just thought it'd be a great time in the fall to kick it off. So we start September 23rd, and if you are interested, you can just contact me. I'd love to meet you and talk to you if you want more information. But yeah, that's where the course is.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I will, of course, include all the links inside of the show notes below for folks to be able to find this and, of course, to connect with you with everything we talked about today for everything. But, Nicole, thank you so much once again for being on here. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure, and I really enjoyed your course. And my course would not exist without yours. So I need to say thank you for that. It's much, much appreciated, and it's been a pleasure. So thank you.
Well, folks, I hope you enjoyed that episode. Be sure to reach out to Nicole and just give her a big thank you for coming on to here, sharing her words of wisdom. I learned quite a bit from this conversation too, which was absolutely awesome. And of course, I'm sure that you learned a thing or two along the way. Once again, her course is going to be launching soon, so go down below inside of the show notes if you want to learn more about accessibility from her perspective and all the things that she shared with us today. As I mentioned early on inside of this episode, she is actually a recent graduate of IDI, Instructional Design Institute, and if you are looking to learn more about designing learning experiences essentially from A to Z, that is our 7-week-long course, and that is going to be starting up again. The next cohort starts on July 15th, so only a couple of months away, and we'll be diving on into there. Be sure, put in your application today, and I cannot wait to see you inside of the class. But hey, folks, that is really all I have for you today. Do the typical things, please, that I always say as far as for subscribing, rating, reviewing the show, all of those things. Your words for everything really do help out with the growth of this show. And once again, I appreciate you, and especially for dedicating your time for everything with this show. But hey, that is all I have for you today. Stay nerdy out there, and I'll talk to you next time.